Welcome to Heels, Handbags, and Hustle. Step in faith, carry love, pursue God's calling. This is your host, Rachel Earp, and I'm so delighted that you found my show. My podcast is dedicated to encouraging women to be more bold, confident, and secure in their work and femininity. I've had the privilege of bringing on many outstanding women who share their journeys, stories, and successes with us. I believe women should embrace their God-given gifts and abilities without the entanglements of fear, comparison, or past mistakes. As a wife, business owner, and mom of 2 boys, one with Down syndrome, I have found such joy in the community of supportive women. My prayer is that this podcast elevates each person who listens and inspires a closer walk with God. Now, let's get to it, friends. Welcome to another episode, friends. I'm so glad you're here today, especially because cannot wait for you to get to know my special guest, Amy Wine, who is on the show with us today. Amy is a faith-led wife, mom, and professional counselor turned personal growth and business strategist. She has helped multitudes of people, and she has touched my life in a special way. So I'm excited. Amy, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. Yes, me too. This is going to be so good. Okay, so I know we got a lot to cover. So let's start at the beginning. Who is Amy Wine?
Oh my gosh, this is the hardest question I ever have. Like, I tell you, people don't know what I do because I don't know how to say it. Just bluntly, I've taken Christian entrepreneurs from chaos to contentment in life and marriage so that they thrive in their businesses. And that's my blanket statement that makes it easier to understand.
I love that.
I am a wife we've been together for 33 years, married for almost 26. I have 3 kids that are in their 20s, 24, 22, and 21. It's a interesting experience. Every age is something different, right? And I have my puppy dogs that are my babies now that my kids swear I love more than them. And other than they're barking right now, they're not wrong.
Right? That's hilarious.
I may not hear in a moment if they don't stop. But,
right?
I am personally like an avid book reader. I read anywhere from 200 to 300 books a year. I don't watch much TV. I'm a closet nerd. Well, I'm not really a closet nerd. I'm out there. I'm just a nerd. And I love learning. I like tacos and beaches and water sounds. I'm pretty easy. And I like connecting with people in smaller groups or one-on-one. Like, that's why I like these interviews, because I get to know people just one-on-one.
Yeah.
Large groups are very draining for me. But professionally, I owned a very large counseling center. I thought it was just going to be me and one other person, and it scaled and grew from 1,000 square feet to 7,500 in 18 months.
Wow.
I did not know what I was doing whatsoever. We hit the 7-figure mark in 11 months. And I went, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
That is when I met Michael Hyatt, and I went into one of his business coaching programs, and I ended up coaching for him and doing business coaching for him. And I'm in one of his books called When It Works, Succeed at Life, because everything he'd say, I was working so many hours. My marriage was failing. My kids didn't know who I was. I was putting my clients, everybody else in front of my health, my family, and my marriage. So, as you know, that is not a good combination. Anyway, going through that, I really learned I loved coaching, but I'm a therapist. Those are 2 different things. So this is where I have the trouble. I will tell you, I'm a bridge. This is the longest intro you've ever had, but I am that bridge from counseling to coaching. And counselors feel like they traditionally, you work on a problem that you have from the past or the now, but usually that goes somewhere into the past that brought it in. And then we work through it and we try to get your behaviors and your emotions. And counselors don't usually move you forward. So people will be in counseling forever and they'll deal with one thing, but then they deal with another and another and another. And I'm like, you should not be in my office for 2 years unless you've got some major disorder or major life trauma. I have major life trauma. It took me 2.5 years of work, but it was major. So you really shouldn't be here, because most people that come to therapy that's not what they have. Like, there's both, right? We just have a problem right now, but then counselors keep them. That drives me crazy. Coaches are known for going now and taking you forward. Well, where's the in between? So I'm the person that knows when to take you backwards and sit there, but I'm not going to let you stay there.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to move you forward. Right.
Yeah.
So I can be the bridge. Whew, longest intro ever. Can't figure out
that. It brings so much clarity. And I feel like people who work with you get the best of both worlds. You know, like you said, they are two distinctively different paths that you take with your client. And both are so important. And sometimes those do just kind of mesh together and run together. And I'm assuming that, okay, I'd like to back up and learn how you got started in this type of industry. Was there something in your own life that did you feel called to do this? Or was this something you kind of stumbled into and realized you were really good at? What's the story behind all of it?
Yeah, I don't know. There was one defining moment. I can tell you that if I fast forwarded from my wedding day to about year 20, which was about 5 years ago, I kind of had a full circle moment, because we had a wedding videographer that didn't ever give us our video. And then I had to like badger him just to get the raw tape. And it was like on a VCR tape. And I finally got that, but I've never had it done or translated into anything that we can see. I don't have a VCR. I finally sent it off to a company to get it digitized, the raw footage. And when we were watching the raw footage, they asked me a question and they said, "What is your dream job?" And I was in my late 20s. I think I got married at 27. And I remember I don't even remember them asking me that. And I definitely would not have remembered what they said. But I said on there very clearly, "Oh, I would love to be a clinical child psychologist." And when I watched it, I was like, I don't ever remember having that dream or thinking that. But somewhere in there, it must have been there. And I actually started out my counseling career with children. I thought I was only going to work with children. I was a teacher.
Oh,
I'm just a late bloomer. It took me a while to get here. And I thought, if I could help a child, and I thought I wanted to be a teacher because you can get the children that are never going to come to therapy. So I was that child. That school was my outlet. It was my safe place. So when summers were going to come, I hated it. Don't make me write about my summer break, because I'm going to have to make it up. There's no way you're going to know what happened to me, right? Like, I had severe abuse. So verbal, physical, sexual from 4 to 18 from my stepfather, and very hidden. We lived in the middle of nowhere. It was just awful. And I just kept thinking I wanted to work with kids. So I also didn't have big dreams at that time. I just thought I would be a teacher. It just seemed normal. But that took me a long time to do. It really did. And I loved it. But one day I realized I want to talk to your kids. I don't want to teach them to read. And I went back to grad school. I finished school that night. I started in the summer that very same night, the last day of school.
Wow.
And went back. And so I started with kids. And then somewhere in there, I worked with a lot of child protective services kids. About 75% of my caseload was, because I was working in a nonprofit. And I realized if I can help their parents, I can help you. Oh. So that's when I started becoming getting all like thousands and thousands of hours of marriage knowledge and working with couples. So I kind of transitioned to working with women and couples, and then still some kids and teens. But now I primarily adults. The good thing is I could talk to you about your kids.
That's amazing. I did not know that about you, that that's
Mm-hmm.
where you actually started. It makes so much sense, the tender heart that you have.
Yeah.
And, it, when you look at this vicious cycle that happens with, whether it's a child going through a trauma that turns into an adult, and then, they say history repeats itself.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have seen everything under the sun, like stories. How did you, coming through your own and healing from your own trauma, was was that triggering for you to go through those sessions, or did you find that you had just surpassed it and it was actually a part of your healing? How
Wow.
does that work? I feel like that would be very hard.
There was such a time gap in between the two. So when I say I'm a late bloomer, like I'm a very late bloomer. So when I graduated high school, that very night of my graduation, I went and lived in my car. I did not go back home. I turned 18 that same day, my birthday, graduation day, and I lived in my car.
Wow.
I had a full ride to the University of Oklahoma based on an ACT score being 1 point from perfect. I have no idea how I did that, but I was. So I got
Wow,
a full
girl.
ride. I flunked out of college though. So
Mm,
I went, I partied and I was wild for 1 year of my life where nobody had control of me. Nobody did anything. I was a little nuts. I faked my grades the first semester, got put on suspension with the school, but they let me stay another one. I never even attempted to go to class. I got a D in a class I never stepped foot in. I don't know what I thought that year. I was not thinking.
yeah.
I was coming out of living in my car to moving into a dorm with a bunch of girls. I've never even had a sleepover in my life. Never allowed any of that. I was crazy. So then after I get kicked out, I am temping because I could type. That's one of the things that happened in high school is I can use a computer and I could type like 150 words a minute. Like I am fast. So that got me jobs because back then it was all typing. And I was working a temp job when I met my husband. I was 19. He was 27. I lied about my age and 22 just came on out. Yeah, that's another story for another day, maybe. But to say the least, I was crazy in my 20s. You would not have recognized me or known me. Like
Yeah.
people today will hear some of my story and they'll be like, what? Like I would have no idea. Got married at 27, had a baby at 28. And it's hard for me to admit, but I started getting angry at the baby. Now, I never hurt her. I was never going to do that. Like I was the one who was never going to repeat anything. So when I got angry, she had colic really bad. She would not sleep all day and she'd scream all night.
Yeah.
And you couldn't go put her to sleep without her holding your finger and dare you to move, right? She'd be screaming all the time. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have support. Our family doesn't live here. I'm not like family that we even talk to. There's some that we don't, but I was getting angry at her. And I thought, I'm never going to do this. Like, I'm never going to be that mom. And I cannot believe this. I had so much shame and inside anger at myself, even having that emotion with a baby. That's really hard to admit. So I put myself in therapy. And I finally, 5 times later, found one that I could deal with. And he was actually a man, which was weird for all of my trauma, especially the sexual. And it took 2.5 years. So during this time, I didn't do college, right? I didn't do any of that. And I remember him saying to me, and this changed my life in multiple ways, but this actually is what got me back into college. He said, and I never will forget it word for word. He said, Amy, do you know you shouldn't be here right now? And me, I'm so flippant. I'm like, well, where should I be? Like, what should I be doing? Right? Because I'm here.
Yeah.
He's like, no, with like 90% certainty, you should be dead, on drugs, a prostitute, or in prison.
Wow.
And at the moment, I looked at him and I go, well, I'm not. So now what?
Of your responses. You know what?
Yeah. I mean, there was no emotion tied to it, nothing. Like it didn't hit me, the gravity of what he was saying in that moment.
Yeah.
And he laughed and he giggled and he said, and he was a Christian counselor. And you have to know, I grew up with atheists. So the next sentence he said was, when God catches you, it's going to be amazing. And I go, well, if there was a God, it's going to be really amazing. And he just kind of giggled. And here I am. So it hit me later, the gravity of that, of where I should be versus where I was. And then I realized I wasn't really living my life.
Yeah.
I was living the past of me. And now I have this baby and I had all these, I never dreams. I was, so I wasn't dreamed about her wedding or her future or what to do in college. Like I was never that kid. So I started dreaming again and I started taking a class here or there.
Hey friends, sliding in here really quick to talk to you about OneShare Health. It is a Christian healthcare company that is such a phenomenal option for those of us who are looking for health insurance, but kind of want to think outside the box when it comes to that coverage. This is a product that I have looked deeply into and I personally use, endorse, and share with other people, and has blessed so many families like ours. The rates are phenomenal, the coverage is amazing, and I just love what they stand for and the integrity behind the company and the products. So if you're a family, a business owner, or an individual that is looking for health insurance options that are outside of what you find in traditional, like through the ACA or other types of venues, I want to encourage you to check out OneShare Health. It's super easy to enroll, and I can share the link in the show notes for you so that you can easily access different types of plans. And if you need help, just remember I am here to answer any questions that you have. So give it a try, check it out, and I hope to be that resource for you in this realm. So thanks for listening, guys.
I think there was such a long time and a long gap between the time I went to therapy for 2.5 years and I actually started being a therapist that a lot of my healing had already happened. So I did not actually start being a therapist until mid 40s. I went back to grad school, early 40s. I had been a teacher, and then I did grad school really I finished a 3-year program in 2 years. I was determined. Don't suggest that to anybody else, but I did. And I think I had so much healing. I was ready for it. However, I wouldn't say that there were triggers in the moment, but when you work with children that have a lot of trauma, those are harder to leave at the office. Right? Yeah. You can't always just leave that. However, when you know how they feel, it helps with that, because when I can tell you based on like my childhood experiences, pretty much how most our emotions are the same, just a different story, right? And they just apply a little bit different, but still we all have the same emotions. So for me, that was rewarding. Being able to understand a kid, make them feel seen, heard, understood really quickly, be able to use their language without even having to work at it. It was just natural for me. And I will tell you that I have this strange ability, and I know this comes from my past as well, and people think it's strange, but it actually helps. I am the person you want in a crisis, because I have the ability to go stone cold calm. Like, you cannot penetrate this. I will not have an emotional reaction. I will not react. I will act and do what is needed next in that moment. So any type of crisis, like, I could just go calm. So should anything trigger me or affect me, there were a couple of men that did. And I chose not to work directly with men, which is funny because now almost all my coaching counseling clients are men. But for a long time, I didn't. And I remember my supervisor saying, Amy, you realize you're cutting out half the population. I was like, I don't care. I got all these kids. I've got these women. I am full. Yeah. Until I started working with couples, it was after that I would start taking a couple of men. I did not for years prefer to have them in counseling one-on-one.
It's so funny. You were talking about being calm in a crisis, and I'm married to someone who is that way.
Okay.
It's so funny because I think that we've had some very pivotal times in our marriage where literally crisis, and it's like an instant different persona, like, or just something shuts down in Dale, and he handles it like he thinks clearly, like you said, no emotions. And I think, like you said, you're the person that you want around in a crisis. Like literally, I have told my husband that so many times. I am the last person that you want in a crisis because I get beside myself. I'm freaking out. I'm like, literally, I don't know what to do. My brain shuts completely off, which doesn't take a whole lot half the time. And it's so sad. And he's the only person that I know personally. And now I didn't know this about you, but that is a very, I feel like unique type. I know you said that's like people think it's strange. Yeah. And it is strange to people like us. I think I'm probably more in like the average where when something tragic happens or there's a crisis, you have a meltdown, you panic, you freeze up, you don't know what to do. And then there's you're calm, cool, and collected and able. And now, is that because of things that you have gone through that is that part? I know you studied psychology. I did not. So what, if you're telling someone about yourself or like my husband, what causes you to be that way?
I knew it had to do with my past, but I can't pinpoint one moment that made me that way. I think when you go through an abusive situation, and I think it depends on the person and the differences, but I wasn't allowed to have an emotion. Like I learned very early age that emotions with certain people were going to get me in trouble. Like having a tear or a facial expression that was going to set somebody off was wrong. So I think it's just ingrained in who I am. And now where it comes out is in that time of crisis, sitting with people on a couch who are telling you the most horrific things. And I can do that without emotion if I block myself. Sometimes I'll open and then I will feel it. Because I'm a very feeling person. Like I can also feel people's emotions. So I have that gift of knowing without them saying it, like with a high accuracy, I can speak for you and say what you're feeling just after a few sentences. And I think it's because I had to learn to read that really young. Really young.
That's incredible. That is so incredible.
Yeah. So I don't think, back to your other question a while back, I don't think I ever really got triggered. There was one time, now I will freak out after the fact. Like, let me be real. Like after everything's calm and everything's over and stuff, like that's when my emotions will release. I will cry. I will do whatever. I had a guy pull a gun on me at the counseling center one time. We were in a couples session. It was a new client. I was there by myself late at night. Learning experience there, right? And they got in a big fight. She walked out. I tried to get him out. And he was clearly in the session struggling mentally, like heavy mental disorder. And you could tell. But my goal was just to get him out. Well, she came back in as we were up by the front desk. And they started yelling all these things at each other. And she left. I asked them to leave. She left. He didn't. And he sat down and he's like, you're going to finish this conversation with me until I'm okay. And I said, no, I'm really not. Like this session's over. Come back. Call me tomorrow. We'll make another appointment. And when you guys calm down, we'll try this again. And he pulled a gun. And he sat down on this little bench, had me sit down at like the receptionist desk and set it next to him and pointed it at me while he proceeded to cry and do all of these things. So I have my cell phone over here and I'm trying to open it and slyly call for help. And he saw me and he said, if you call for help right now, I'm going out of here shooting. Like, I'm going to shoot them. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to shoot myself. And I was like, huh. And then he took my phone and threw it. This was the moment. The next day we got panic buttons all throughout the office and ones that we could wear or put in our pocket just in case we ever needed it, which we never did again. But through it all, I was like this. He ended up calling his mom. I was able to talk him into going to the ER mental hospital, like to get checked for suicide because he was suicidal as well. But he wouldn't let me call the police or an ambulance. Are you frozen again? Oh, no, you're there. So he wouldn't let me do that. Well, how are you going to do it? But he was in no place to drive. And then we realized they came together and the girl had taken the truck. He has no way to get anywhere. The mom has the kids. So not very smart looking back. I took him. We get about...
Tell me you took it.
I did.
Wow.
Not very smart, but I couldn't think of another way out. Like, I knew I needed to get out, but he's not going to let me call. And if this continues, one of us is getting shot, and it's probably not going to be him because I don't have a gun. Or something, or he's going to kill himself in front of me. Like, I don't know what's happening. But through this all, just stone cold calm. So we get 2 blocks from the hospital, and he says, I need you to turn right here. What? He said, I have to drop off this gun. I can't go into the hospital with a gun.
Oh.
And I did. I turned. I stayed in the car. He drops it off with his mom. His kids come out and he hugs them. I don't leave. I couldn't leave.
Wow.
I wait on him. And in the meantime, I call the hospital. And I say, hey, I'm coming and this is what's happening. And you might want to have somebody ready. And then, because we call the hospital a lot, so I've got the number. The next person I called was a counselor at the office that says, could you call my husband and tell him why I'm not home, but tell him not to call me because I cannot speak to him right now. That I will call him when this is done, but this client has a gun on me and you need to know where I'm at. And I hang up because he's getting in the car. Does my husband not call me immediately over and over and over and over and over again? I'm like, seriously? You're agitating this person? I'm 1 block away from the hospital. Get to the hospital, pull up, not answering my husband because he's the freak out person. And I call him in the first place. Like all the other people. So we get to the hospital. I pull up and he looks at me and goes, you're coming in, right? I was like, well, I wasn't. No, you just go on in. They're going to help you. It'll be fine. Well, no, I need you to come in. Okay. I park. I walk in and they know me here. Like I've had multiple clients here and I'm looking and I'm like, it's a Friday night. And the reason I remember that is because we go out on Friday nights with our friends and they were all waiting on me, trying to figure out where I was. And there's nobody in the ER. I live in Houston, Texas. There's always somebody in the ER. They had cleared it. And as soon as the second set of double doors open, whoosh, cops tackled him, and took him. And then the ER person, I was like, you good? You need me? And she's like, no, we're good. I turned around and walked out. And then by this time, my husband and the counselor and her husband are pulling into the parking lot. I take one look at them and I'm like,
Oh.
Lost. Yeah. My husband's like, you have lost your mind. Like, I can't even have a conversation with you right now. I'm so mad at you.
I cannot imagine. Like, wow.
In my mind, looking back, and I did go back to therapy to figure out what was wrong with me, that I could do that. Because that's the first time I remember that I probably should have freaked out. And I didn't, and I thought something was wrong. And they're like, no, you learned very early on how to manage those types of situations, because that was like my daily life, right? I didn't have a gun pulled on me all the time, but I did. I'd had one before multiple times. So I think you just learn it. I don't know. That's probably a longer response and story than you wanted, but
no, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I as you were talking, I feel like that it's almost like when you come through those types of situations and you're able to handle them that way, it's a second nature, like that you revert back to because you were in those types of high stress predicaments and trauma so much that that's who you had to become to cope with it and to deal with it. So you learn how to read people, and you learn how to feel, the emotions, because that was your survival. That's what you had to do to survive and cope and just keep on, living day after day. But look at what God did and how he now is using you to help be a part of the healing of so many different people, including even that crazy man that that was, like, who knows if you hadn't been that person, though, who knows what would have happened. Like, that's insane.
And, he called 48 hours later and wanted to come back in. And I was like, I don't see men on their own, right? I saw them as a couple, and I knew that wasn't happening anymore. She was done. So we told him no, but he begged because he felt like I understood him, right? Like, I don't know how, but apparently I have that about me. And I feel like I can't say I'm grateful for the things that happened to me, because I don't think that is there's no word to describe it. Yeah. But I know God has redeemed it. Right. Yeah. I know that I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do. Right. And that is to help people in their life and their relationships so they can learn to thrive. Because I will never forget one of the things the counselor said to me. And did I tell you this already? The 4 things he said I should be? I don't think I did.
Yeah, you did mention
early
that.
On. I will never forget that. So one of the things I said that, I did, because I said that it impacted me in multiple ways. And one of them was finally learning that there was a God, and knowing that on that very night that I graduated high school and I went to live in my car, I said the prayer at my high school graduation. And there is no reason I should have. The teacher asked me to. Remember, I'm not going to ever tell any authority figure no. There's a whole story around that. And I fast forward mid 30s, sitting at church, still not really believing, coming out of therapy with a Christian counselor who's trying to convince me. My husband, that's the thing we do. We go to church since I met him, but I'm the one that's sitting back there grumbling about it all the time. And we're in church, and the pastor said something, and I went, oh my gosh. I never remembered writing that prayer, but because I lived in my car, I had a box of stuff that I took with me. I never looked at it again. And in that moment, I had to run out of that church in the middle of the sermon. Luckily, we're in the back row, to my non-rule breaking husband. Tears. You have to take me home right now. I have to find something.
Wow.
And when I read it, it was from John chapter 12, right before Jesus goes on the cross. So what I did, longer story, but what I did is I opened a Bible, I pointed to a verse and said, that's just what I'm throwing in it. And it talks about going from darkness to light. And when you proceed out these doors tonight, after your graduation, I pray that you find your light. Now, to nobody else there, would that have maybe made sense? But I was so coming out of darkness.
Yeah.
I just didn't even know it. And when I found it that day, I went, there has to be a God, because there is no reason that I wrote that prayer, that verse, that thought. And then the last very part of it said, and Jesus went and hid.
Wow.
And that actually didn't hit me. That sentence didn't hit me until I was at a function with Tim Tebow Foundation. And I told this story and they asked to read the verse. We read it and the last line said, and Jesus went and hid. And I went, wait, what? Because I had been saying that I had been hiding from what God wants me to do online for 6 months before it.
Wow.
And in that moment, I was like, okay, Jesus did go hid, but then he came out and he did the hard thing and he went to the cross and he died for us, for me. So I know it's been redeemed. I know he was there. He was there in the neighbors that fed me. He was there in my grandmothers on my dad's side who would come around enough that I saw something else out of life. He was in some of my teachers. Yeah. I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. It gives me goosebumps. Just picturing the way that God speaks to us and the way he confirms his word. And when he calls you, how he does it so personally and so uniquely to what we need and what we need to receive and the words that we need to hear. And that is, it's almost like as you're talking about your life, like I'm picturing it and like this movie scene that unfolds. And I just have so much even greater respect for you and what you are doing with your life and being willing to be that vessel and being obedient despite you could have so easily. And I guess going back to what those 4 things that, that person had told you, you could have easily justifiably just lived in one of those categories and anyone would understand and be like, wow, it totally makes sense. But God, even despite the sadness and the trauma, God still had his hand on you and he knew that you were going to be a tool and a vessel to help so many people, even just people that you meet for a few minutes and you may not ever see them again. You have so much impact. And I can see that is what propels you forward every day too, that is your desire. And that's truly the deep heart's desire of why you do what you do. It makes so much sense now. And it also makes sense, you encompassing, and you mentioned going back to the beginning where you talked about you're the bridge. I think that's so beautiful. I think of so many parts of my life where you've always heard that saying, that's water under the bridge, or, don't burn a bridge. Let's not burn that bridge. Bridges are what connects. Bridges are what fills in the gap and leads us to the next destinations when there is no way to get across. And I think you were just a beautiful bridge, Amy.
Oh, thank you. I hadn't thought about that, the significance of the bridge, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, I'm literally picturing it. And I've always thought bridges were so unique and so purposeful. And, I look back at different times in my life where I had thought there was no bridge, that there was no way of restoration or getting to the next place in my life with someone or with family or with whatever. And God literally built a bridge. And I think that's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that for you too.
Thank you. Yeah. That's the beautiful thing about our stories is being able to get to a place in our life where we can, and we don't, sometimes it's not meant for us to share for a while because it's still it's still unfolding. God is still writing it. And then, there's times where it's like, okay, it's time for me to share. This is a moment, or this part of my story is meant to share now. And I think it's so important that we are obedient to that when we feel that nudge to do. And that just happens to be what you do on a daily basis now. And so moving into kind of the entrepreneurial aspect of starting your own entity and business, was that something that felt scary to you, embarking on something that was, I mean, not anyone can be a business owner or an entrepreneur and then scale to the extent that you did so quickly? And I know you said you came to a point where you're like, oh, I need help. So what are your words of wisdom for people that are maybe afraid, of taking that next step? And what did that look like for you?
For me, I just dove right in.
Why am I not surprised? You're just like, let's do it.
I honestly, I had helped open a counseling center for a nonprofit, and then they had changed leaders over the time. And then the new leader hit my integrity button, and integrity is one of my core values. And when you're going to come at me and tell me I'm doing all these things I'm not doing, and it was just bad. So I got really mad one day. I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I'm not fighting back. I'm just doing my thing. I have a full client load anyway that I got myself. And they even moved me out of the office into the church did the nonprofit, and then they split. So the directors moved me to the church, which actually caused more problems. But I got mad one day and I'm like, counselor space for rent.
Really?
Yep. And I found it. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. I'm going to make the phone call. I made the phone call and they're like, can you come tomorrow to look at it? We have an office here. And I'm like, yes, I will be there. I mean, it was very clear that it was not going to be a good fit. I saw children. They didn't want to hear or see children flopping all over the counter. They're like, they just need to sit here. And all the offices open to the waiting room. And I'm like, this is not going to be I see children, right? Like, you knew that before I came. They're not going to sit here quietly and leave your coffee thing alone. I see children. Yep. So, and I have toys, like we might be banging something. So I knew it wasn't going to be a fit. As I was leaving, I saw a sign that said office space for lease. I had not even really thought about opening my own. And I used to own a scrapbook store. So being an entrepreneur, like I've done so many jobs, it's ridiculous, but I wasn't that new to it. Okay. I think that actually prepared me for this moment. Yeah. And the guy says, well, I don't really have anything right now. He says, I have one that would fit what you're asking for. I said, I just need a couple offices and a waiting room and a bathroom. That's it. Mm-hmm. And he's like, so I look at it, I go, I'll take it. Yeah. He's like, well, there's somebody in front of you. So if they say no, then I'll come to you next. I was like, oh, okay. He goes, what do you really want? I said, 2 offices, a waiting room. If you had a little kitchen, that'd be good too, because I spent a lot of time at work. Maybe a file area and something. He's like, yeah, I don't have that. I get 2 miles down the road and he calls me back and he says, can you come back? I might have something for you. There was a real estate office that had 2 suites and they were building in another area. And actually the area I was working in that time. And they wanted out of their lease early and he wasn't going to let them. Well, guess what? 3 offices, a kitchen, a little file, desk, printer area, and a waiting room that did not open to the doors. It was separate. And he said, can you wait 2 months? And I was like, I sure can. I literally wrote him a check in the parking lot. I did not tell my husband. I did not tell anybody. He did not do a background check. And I live in Houston, Texas. There's usually 40, 50-page leases. And he is like, hey, I have a 4-page lease. I've been doing this for years. You don't pay your rent, I kick you out, but I like you. And I know character, so I'm going to let this happen. That's how it happened.
That is so crazy. That's wild. So it was just...
So I guess my thing would be take the step. Like, maybe don't be so crazy. Think about it a little bit.
Take the step. Yep.
Just take action, even if it's a small step, because I think we sit and we think about it and we dream about it and we maybe want it, but we're too scared sometimes to just move. So take the next small step, sit with it, take the next one.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. I think people forget that the steps are important to, we want to just leap sometimes. And sometimes it sounds like you kind of did leap at that. You did kind of leap. That was a big step. And it's funny because I look back at, I've had people ask me this question also. And everything, Dale and I have a tendency to do kind of the same thing where we just die. Like we don't just kind of get our feet wet and then, kind of wade in. We just dive, and everybody's different. And I will say, I think it's important for people to recognize what that process is going to look like for you. And it's not going to be the same as someone else.
Right.
For some of us, we dive in. For some of us, the important thing though is to take action, like you said. And I think people get hung up on comparing it to everyone else, No,
I do. And if I had to say one thing to the people that listen to you is I think we get hung up on things. We compare ourselves. Sorry, I'm turning it on Do Not Disturb. Different computer. Okay, now I'm ready again. I really never have this problem. I just did 4 interviews without an interruption. I'm sorry. God does not God. The enemy does not want this story out there or something. That's all I got.
That makes it all the more amazing because it's just when you go through these obstacles, there's a reason the enemy's trying to stop this.
No, I've literally been on here for 4 previous hours without a problem, without a dog, without anything. Okay. Here's what I would say. If I had to wrap everything I could ever say and think about what is the most important thing I want other people to know. And that is we all have emotions. And I kind of touched on it earlier. And we all have the same emotion. But what we do is we compare ourselves and our stories. So when I go talk to people on a stage, and if I'm going to tell my story, I will always say at the beginning, you're going to hear a story from me today. And there's going to be you in the audience that's like, oh my gosh, I've got nothing to worry about. I don't know what I was complaining about last night. Like none of that happened to me. Like I am terrible for the things that I complain about. Right. And then the person sitting next to you is going to go, you've got nothing. Let me tell you my story. Because we're always going to have stories that are worse or better, but we're too busy putting them on this scale to make sense of them, right? To make it make sense in our mind. Very few people can probably relate to my dark, right? And my dark experiences. So I have to be very careful about that when I share that we're still being able to relate to the thing because we all have the same emotions and we all feel the same things. It's just our story is different. So I want everybody to really watch the comparison and then the self shame when we feel like we're not doing enough or we're not enough or we've complained too much or our stuff doesn't mean as much as their stuff does because it's the enemy coming in. It's still kill and destroy. Take your spirit, take everything because we all have the same emotions. We just have a different story.
That is amazing. I love how you summed up, and I appreciate you bringing that to light because I feel like that's a stumbling block for a lot of people is the comparison. But also on the other end, have you ever told someone something like if they ask you, oh, how was your day? And you're actually honest. Most of the time I think, oh, great. We don't even think about, well, can I tell this person that my day wasn't so great? And because that is a type of being vulnerable. And when I know we've probably all been around that person where you share what's going on and then they instantly swoop in with how much more horrible their day was. Well, let me tell you what happened to me today. And, oh, I've been through that. And this was way worse and then you're sitting there like, this just doesn't help at all. The shift is now back on that person just has a tendency to constantly, it's refocusing back on themselves. So you just kind of get to the point where you don't answer truthfully because it's hard to find people that truly do actually care about how are you really? Everything has become so cliche to where there's, finding that person that you feel you can confide in is hard because once again, people want to compare. They just want to compare the hurt or the success. We get that a lot in the business realm is, the success thing. As soon as you do something you're proud of, somebody else wants to come in and take it a step further and shove it in your face and make you feel like, that's great, but look what I did, So then it's like, well, why am I even trying?
Right.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts so I really, when my kids were in elementary school, I went back to the therapy and the counselor asked me what brings you joy. And I couldn't answer the question. I had no idea. I'd lost myself somewhere along the way of being mom and wife and chauffeur and doctor and nurse, accountant, dog poo picker upper, like all the things. Right. And I started to be honest with people. And when you see people in passing, and I did a lot of things at the school, like I volunteered hundreds of hours, right? Keep myself busy, and you don't have to deal with your junk. And I started, when people say, hi, how are you? I started going, oh, I'm not that great. First person just said, oh, okay, I'll see you later. What? Second person, I'm not doing too good. Oh, sorry to hear that. I got to go. So I started just saying that. And for a week, I was telling everybody, I am not fine. It took 5 days. And I don't even know how many tens of people, because it was a lot where I'm like, no, I'm not fine. Most of them would skip right over it. Like they didn't expect that answer. So they didn't even register in their mind and they're busy in their hurry to get wherever. Wow. Finally on Friday, a lady says, what? As she started to keep going, she goes, what? I go, I'm not fine. And when she stopped in that moment and turned around, I just started bawling. Oh, wow. And I'm like, do you know you're the first person that stopped because I've told 20, 30 people this week the same thing. And she goes, I almost didn't even realize. And she sat with me and she talked and then she kept checking up on me. And this is a woman I knew acquaintance wise, but was not a friend. Right. And, she made such an impact in my life. Like, I wouldn't say we became lifelong friends, but for that moment, for that month, she made an impact in my life because she stopped and she saw me and she sat there and she listened. She didn't have advice. She didn't know what to do with it. She couldn't relate.
Yeah.
But she stopped.
Yeah. That's a shame, isn't it? Like when you think of, I think it really helps. It helps you understand what people really are. And that's it. I mean, not that you want to go around doing that all the time, but I mean, that is a real eye opener to the people in your life. And like you said, it's not always that you have to jump in and immediately give people advice. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to listen and to just be there in it with them. Just be in it with them. And for some of us, that's very hard. So for I don't mean to keep bringing up my husband, but he is very much a person that has a lot of advice. Like he is instant. First thing he because that's his language of love is to help. He wants to advise and he wants to help people. And I'm the opposite, where I will just sit there and listen and the compassion, and it works really well when we're together. But it was very hard for me with him for a really long time, because when I would go to him with a hurt or a problem and he would just instantly, well, you need to do this, 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 and this. Sometimes I didn't want that. and I would push it away, and then he wouldn't understand, like, why are you, I'm trying to help you and solve your problem and fix your problem. And I'm like, I don't want that. I just want you to listen to me.
Just hear me.
It's just hear me, and it's funny because we'd have the complete opposite conversations when he would have something and I didn't try to come and swoop in and be the save the day. I would just sit there and just listen. He'd be like, do you even care? I do. Like, right. I'm here listening. I'm listening. But you're not saying anything. I don't have the words to say back. I don't have any advice. I'm here to, it's just so funny how different people
it are. Is. I tell couples, my husband and I are the same way, but I'm the one that's advice giving. And he's like, are you counseling me? No counseling, no coaching for you. But if you would. So I tell people all the time, like, you have to say, I just want you to hear me and listen to me and not give me advice. And then you almost have to like sit on your hands. If you're the advice type giver, like zip those lips, sit on your hands and
very hard.
It can be. I do both because that's the difference, right? Like counselors don't give advice. This counselor does.
Yeah.
I'm more interactive. I'm like, well, let me share this with you and you see if it resonates or if this is something that you could do. Because sometimes you don't know, right? You don't know. You just need somebody to give you something different. And I never push it, but I'm like, well, let me tell you this story or whatever. So, but yeah, with my husband, I'm like, are you wanting me just to listen or you want me to fix that?
Yep. That's really good. Yeah. And I have loved, getting to know more of, I really would like to do a part 2 sometime with you.
Yes, please.
Because there's so much that I want to know still and that I'm so fascinated by. I think too, because I know you have so much to give and so much wisdom to share too, that we could have so many of these conversations. But for this purpose, for today, I just want to thank you for being authentic about your story and for the wisdom that you have shared, and for people that are listening that maybe can relate to trauma and, maybe they have emerged through it and, they're just at that point in life where they're like, well, I want to know, like, what can I do to make some good out of it? What are some last words of wisdom you can give for that person right now and what they're feeling?
I would say just trust that God is going to redeem it. And it may not see it now. You may not see it until heaven, but everything that you went through, God is going to use it for his purposes and his good. He didn't want it. He didn't wish it on you. He didn't do any of those things, but he will take it and he will translate it. So if you have any idea or inkling that you thought, I've ever had this thought of something I would want to do and just thought it wasn't possible. Like, I never thought it was going to be possible. I graduated barely high school, let alone get a college degree and a master's, and I'm entering my doctorate program in 2 weeks. Like,
wow,
those things never happen. And I'm 53. Like, I'm old. Come on, late bloomer over here. But I got a lot of life to live. I'm just trying to live it in the last half. And just go do the thing. Like, life is too short. Just go do the thing. I waited so long to start living. Just start living.
Start living and do the thing. Those are two powerful, small phrases, but so powerful. So thank you for sharing that. I think that is just the perfect way to put a bow on everything. Just, it's so important. For those who have listened and want to follow you, Amy, how can they connect with you? I know you love to connect with people. What are the best ways for them to find, like, kind of get in touch with you?
amywine.com, like the drink, WINE. You have to type it in or you're going to get Amy Winehouse, and then it's a whole thing. Competing with her on the internet is a problem.
I went into that one time.
amywine.com or Amy Wine Co. on like Instagram, Facebook. anywhere else. And I have a podcast called Couch Time with Amy Wine that we're going to have you on.
I'm so excited about that. I'm truly so excited. I love your podcast. It is so good. So I will make sure to link all of those. And again, Amy, thank you for sharing your beautiful story and what God has done in your life. And I'm excited to, we definitely, for those of you who are watching this and you notice the change of scenery, we had some technical, we had some stuff. I'm just going to say we were trying to do the thing and all kinds of stuff, but we did it. And
that's right.
That makes it even more special. That's right. That's right.
It's kind of so funny and fitting for the theme, right? Like just push through the trouble.
That's why I mentioned it. I feel like I had to throw that in there. But yes, thank you again so much, Amy. This has been so wonderful. Thank you again for being on the show today.
I appreciate you having me.
Well, friends, I just want to thank you for listening today. And if this show has meant something to you, please leave a review or rating on whatever platform you're listening to. Also, make sure you follow the show. This helps me continue bringing episodes like this where women can share their stories and link arms together. I hope you feel inspired and refreshed. Now get out there and hustle, girlfriends.